We're back on InfoWars Nightly News, and I'm delighted to be joined by Charlie Skelton, who, of course, covers the annual Bilderberg Group conference on behalf of the Guardian newspaper. And as we also know, Charlie helps write some of the most popular comedy shows broadcast on UK television. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Well, first off, Charlie, just confirm for us that you will be in attendance in Chantilly next weekend.
Well, assuming I get through the torturous process of the airport, then I think, yeah, I will be there. I've got my visa, I've got my NUJ card, I've got everything. I'm fully legitimate. I'm going to be there covering it this year, yeah.
I was just saying to you before we started, I've provided the TSA with your precise arrival time and flight number, and they assured me they're going to make you feel very welcome.
Well, that's extremely kind of you. I very much look forward to the fond welcome that I'll get at customs or whatever security.
But you were saying it's not your first experience with the TSA.
Well, I did have a slight run-in on September last year where it wasn't that bad, but the gentleman was so rude to me about shouting at me, put the belt in the thing and the shoes in the tray, and I just said please. He said put the belt in the thing and the shoes in the tray, and I said please, and we had this stand-up. I just simply wanted him to say the word please, and then I went and after I eventually obviously bowed down, and I complained to his supervisor. I turned into sounding like Prince Charles, incredibly posh, and just said I'm a frequent flyer and this is just not good enough. And anyway, but it was very. That was just a little minor glimpse of. It was so dehumanizing having this person just shout at me. I just thought this isn't right. I'm gonna try and humanize this moment with just simple words of courtesy.
Well, I'm sure it'll be somewhat different from the Swiss experience, who are generally very friendly, but I'm sure you'll be fine. Bilderberg, then, I was reading a Politico article which came out on Sunday, and they actually quoted Mitt Romney's foreign policy advisor, Robert Kagan, and he said, quote, he described Bilderberg as, quote, a lot of vaguely uninteresting people giving vaguely uninteresting lectures and then having nice meals in nice places. So, Charlie, do you think the likes of, Eric Schmidt, NATO heads, global power brokers, do you think they bother to fly halfway across the world every year for a nice meal?
It's amazing. They all managed to get their diaries. They've managed to find 3, or in some cases 4 days clear. And this is, we're not talking about just some guys here and this. It's, it is the CEO of Shell and the chairman of Shell and the vice chairman of Shell and, the major shareholder in Shell. And you've got the head of the CEO, the chairman of Barclays. You've got the CEO of Airbus. It just goes on and on. You've got Joseph Ackerman, the head of Deutsche Bank. And these are not small fry. I mean, last year we had the Chancellor of the Exchequer there for 3 days in official capacity with a member of the Treasury staff, and not a single word came out from him, or barely written about it. And it was just extraordinary. And when the attack dogs come out and say, oh, it's just some old farts playing golf, or excuse my French, it's just a supper club or something. No, it's not. It's a very, very serious conference that lasts for 3 days. They have lanyards and a schedule they stick to, and it's a very, very serious business. And it gets me very annoyed when I hear it written off like that, because it's just a lie, basically.
Well, we know it's a lie because of their own leaked documents. I mean, they were talking about the euro single currency as far back as 1955. And of course, Etienne Davignon bragged that they helped create it before the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. Willie Clays, the former NATO Secretary General, admitted in a 2010 radio interview that Bilderberg attendees turn up at the conference, they set the consensus for policy, and then in their each respective sphere of influence, they go back and implement that policy. And he said that publicly. So I don't see how they can claim anymore that it's just a game of golf.
Well, they can keep claiming it for as long as the mainstream media keeps ignoring it, unfortunately. Because there's this strange, and I'm going to use the word conspiracy, but a strange conspiracy of kind of ignorance that surrounds it, that that's perpetuated by the mainstream media. That sort of, I think about this a lot because it baffles me every time I go there. I get a real sense of sort of cognitive dissonance when this massive event is happening. All the helicopters and the machine guns and the armed guards and the limousine after limousine after limousine and this massive hotel lockdown, and then you turn around and you go, well, where's the press? I don't understand. The Chancellor of the Exchequer isn't here. The Deputy Secretary of State, James Steinberg, or whatever. Any number of European foreign ministers or finance ministers. And you're going, I don't quite get it. I don't see where the press is. But I think what's happened is that they kept the lid tight for so long and for so many years that now, if you're in the media, you sort of you don't really know about it that much, although that is changing a bit. And B, you're sort of a bit embarrassed to admit that you don't. So you kind of just ignore it. So I don't know. That's me trying to put a positive spin on the ignorance and stupidity of the mainstream media, of which I'm a proud member for a week.
Well, I mean, that was one of the other questions. Do you consider yourself a member of the mainstream media, or just, a foot in each camp, as it were?
Oh, definitely, I do. I mean, I do, and I've been treated extremely well by The Guardian over for the last, this will be my 4th year doing it. They let me write what I want. They're extremely pleased with the amount of traffic the articles get on the web. It goes to, I've had the articles be the most viewed on the website, and it's good. That shows that there's an appetite for people to know about this stuff, and it's just, it's neither a weird conspiracy, nor is it a supper club or a bunch of people playing a bit of snooker for a couple of days. It's a very, very serious political event and historical event. You mentioned you went back to the 50s. I mean, it goes back earlier. And, you look at the people who in the late 40s are sort of maneuvering to set this thing up. And, it's not set up by the Tooth Fairy and Mary Poppins. It's set up by very senior members of the CIA and the British intelligence. And it has its roots in very dark places. And it still does. Last year, the keynote address was given by the head of the NSA. It hasn't really changed. Really very much. It's still this strange mixture of high finance, politics, and the intelligence services.
I remember when you first started covering Bilderberg for The Guardian, you were kind of tasked with writing a humorous, entertaining piece about it. I want to know, has your view of Bilderberg changed in those years? Has it become more kind of hardcore, or is it still in the humorous camp?
It's a bit of both, but I tell you what has changed is I've done a lot more research, and something that you guys on InfoWars or Prison Planet keep saying is read the documents, just read the documents, and you can do that. And Bilderberg is a very good example of that. You can read this. You can read declassified cabinet papers. You can read stuff on really good stuff, academic work that's been done around the setting up of this and later on. And you can start looking as well. And this is very instructive. Just looking at who the people are that are sitting in this conference for these 3 days. And something that I wasn't aware properly. I've just discovered the presence of Goldman Sachs is a lot more than I was aware. I just did by reading the people's where they sit on various boards. You've got the chairman of Goldman Sachs International. You've got a member. That's Peter Sutherland. You've got Mario Monti. Who's the new Italian PM. He's a former Goldman Sachs international advisor. And you've got James A. Johnson, who sits on the board of Goldman Sachs. And those three are all on the steering group of the committee, so of the Bilderberg group. So I've only just learned that now. It's a big, long learning. That's one thing I've learned. There's so much to learn. It's just frightening.
So, Charlie, we see thousands of people at these global summits. Why do you think the Bilderberg group, despite the fact that it has many of the same attendees, why don't we see a similar kind of protest group, especially amongst left-wing activists?
That's a good question. I mean, one thing is that my small experience of going along to these meetings, the people that do go and protest, and there really aren't very many, although it's been growing and growing to the point where, you know, it's in the hundreds now, they are much more switched on. They've got a much wider and deeper political understanding than you generally get in, and I'm just, you know, generalizing. And I think that they've had to obviously do a bit of digging themselves, because this thing has been withheld from the public consciousness. And I've got for so long that it's just sort of, it just isn't in people's brains to go along, weirdly. And I think that's changing. I think it really is changing. And I think this is going to be a watershed year. But if you look back, I've got a cutting from the Daily Express, a British paper from the 50s, and it reports a tiny little paragraph. But the substance of the report is that no one's really allowed to talk about this thing. And the problem is that for decades, simply no one talked about it at all. You know, very few people. And then now the word is spreading, and it's spreading, you know, it's spreading through sites like InfoWars, and, you know, I'm doing my little bit, and the internet is churning it up, and people are starting to dig and look and understand. And so people are just starting to realize how important this meeting is. So I think everything's changing, basically. And I think, you know, hopefully at the end of this year, we'll be going, wow, that was incredible. Look how many people turned up. There were 2,000-3,000 people. And I think it will, you know, I live in hope.
So do you think there was a kind of stigma around it, which is rapidly disappearing, where it was seen as a concern of crazy, paranoid conspiracy theorists, whereas now people see it as a threat to everybody's freedom, no matter what political persuasion they come from?
Absolutely, and I've been involved a little bit in the Occupy movement in London, and they put out a statement recently when a member of an ex Goldman Sachs managing director was being sort of manoeuvred towards possibly taking over at the Bank of England, because they understand that, you know, the great tentacles of Goldman Sachs are wrapped around the throat of the world, etc. And they've started to see through the corruption that they're objecting to, particularly on Wall Street and in London and in the big financial centres. They're starting to put two and two together and say, well, who are these people? And they're looking at Bilderberg and going, well, it's just them. I mean, if there's a group of people that you know, as an occupier, that I'm particularly annoyed at, they're all sitting around a table with the politicians at Bilderberg. So they're starting to see that it's the same problem. And, you know, and I think that the whole sort of left-right thing is going to start vanishing around. You know, when you see the word Occupy Bilderberg, it's two words I would never thought to see together. You know, a mainstream activist movement combined with quite an esoteric, or so has been for a while, esoteric political interest, Bilderberg. And I think that's going to start exploding these barriers that have existed. And then it's going to start being taken up, and it's just going to be used, understood, and looked at, and hopefully just join the mainstream where it belongs.
And that's in no small part to your work and other people, like, for example, David Swanson, the big anti-war activist, came out last week and urged people on the left to join the Occupy Bilderberg protest. So that kind of synergy really is coming together. Just final question here, Charlie. Give me a Charlie Skelton survival guide for staking out Bilderberg. What advice would you give to people who are planning to make the trip to Chantilly next weekend?
Oh my goodness. Obey the law. Number one. Well, I say that. Bring a lens. Bring a big lens. Bring the biggest lens that you can get your hands on, because the more lenses pointed in the more places, it means that we, the alternative media, now to put my alternative media hat on, or such media as will be there, can start piecing together the real story of what's going on. And, you know, someone last year got a glimpse of, I don't even know who it was, actually, I should be able to credit them, but took a photo through a car window and got a photograph of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. And through that photograph, it enabled us to do a bit more digging, a bit more journalism, and actually contact the Treasury and to establish that he was there officially. So be prepared to take photos and sit out in strange places watching cars whiz past you. But also be prepared to meet some amazing people. And, you know, for me, apart from the first time I went, where it was just a nightmare and I got chased around by the Greek police. But every other time, I get to meet amazing people who are, it makes you feel a lot less lonely. You suddenly don't have to take stuff for granted. You're not talking to people that you talk to people that know stuff, and you can begin conversations on a different level, and it's very nice. And I absolutely urge people to go. Any of your listeners, stroke viewers, who are even contemplating going, I would go, because it's an extraordinary spectacle. Apart from anything else, it's an extraordinary spectacle, and it's an important thing to go to, and you will meet amazing people.
And it looks like an all-time record in terms of protest numbers. I'm going to dwarf anything we've seen before. So Charlie Skelton, I look forward to reading your always excellent and humorous articles at The Guardian, which of course, as you talked about, just getting massive traffic through the Drudge Report and other promotion. And we look forward to seeing your work at Bilderberg 2012. Charlie Skelton, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Again, I would urge you to subscribe at prisonplanet.tv. Of course, many of you watch this on YouTube, but YouTube doesn't give us any money to produce it. It doesn't give us money to pay for the cameras, the bandwidth, etc., etc. So we really appreciate your subscriptions at prisonplanet.tv. Of course, you get the live show, you get the Alex Jones radio show, full archives stretching back years and years, speeches, interviews, all that good stuff. And it all supports this network. prisonplanet.tv, 15-day free trial still running at prisonplanet.tv. And also, as you probably know, we've just launched Planet InfoWars, which is our huge new social networking website for info warriors. We're not going to divulge your information. We're not going to sell it to corporations like Facebook, Twitter. We're not a giant NSA database, and you'll meet a ton of like-minded, interesting people there. You can get your blog on there, organize activist events, all kinds of good stuff, and that's planetinfowars.com. That's going to do it for tonight's edition of InfoWars Nightly News. I've been Paul Joseph Watson. We'll see you on the next edition. Take care.
For more than 6 years, I've talked on the air about creating a social network. PlanetInfoWars.com is in its beta phase. We're just launching it. And I want to invite all of you out there to be in on the ground level. Planet InfoWars is about people coming together, forming activist organizations, getting involved politically, hunting and fishing, gardening, dating. This is a place for people who love freedom to meet and to talk and to write and to post information. And I give you this pledge. We are not going to spy on you and sell your data to the New World Order. PlanetInfoWars.com is free, so people who love freedom can get together, connect with people who are awake and know what we're facing. Be active, organize, take action, go viral, create, contribute, resist, because resistance is victory. You are victory. It's waiting for you to breathe power into it. PlanetInfoWars.com.